Hello, if you want to watch exclusive lemon content on What If Naruto, then go to my Boosty. The first link in the description here contains such hot stories for adults, such as What If Naruto was a daddy for Sarada, or Kushina and Mikoto vulgar Naruto mommies. Follow the link and enjoy. I'm waiting for you.
Among the many casualties were men, women and children who were not shinobi, and this would continue if Kurogi was not stopped. "We have to wait until Yondaime arrives," the injured Jounin shouted, before he charged again to fight Kurogi. "Don't let him get close to the village," shouted another wounded Jounin who knelt down to catch his breath before returning to action. Moments later, a giant reddish-brown toad, known as Gamabunta, was seen opening up. He passed through the forest towards the big red nine-tailed fox, with a very familiar blonde-haired shinobi dressed and equipped as a Hounen, standing on his head in a white trench coat, with flame designs on the bottom of the coat. The presence of this shinobi was a sight for sore eyes for everyone who saw it, except Kyuubi. This shinobi was Namikaze Minato, also known as Yondaime Okage. The big nine-tailed fox growled fiercely as he looked directly at Yondaime. Seeing the fox within range, Yondaime began to make a series of complex hand seals, beginning the process of sealing the fox. However, the Kyuubi pounced on Gamabunta. The attempt to kill Yondaime. However, seconds before the Kurogi arrived at Yondaime, a bright flash of white light covered the forest, blinding everyone who was there. After several moments, the great light went out, restoring everyone's sight. Kurogi no Kitsune, Gamabunta, and Yondaime were nowhere in sight. The fight ended and Kyuubi was finally defeated, but at a great cost. Meanwhile, Sarutobi Irizen, also known as Sandaime Okage, was in an undisclosed chamber with a crying newborn child resting on a cushion on the floor with candles ceremonially arranged to his around. 3 Sambu were also present with Sarutobi, and Ruzen suddenly felt a very strong chakra making its way to the baby. He sighed sadly to himself, knowing that Yondai successfully performed the forbidden sealing jutsu on me, which cost him his life. The chakra suddenly burst into the chamber and made its way into the baby's stomach. However, seeing this chakra alarmed Irizen. The chakra that was infused into the baby was not red as expected. Instead, this very strong chakra was blue and emitted a very familiar aura with a flash. The blue chakra was completely infused into the baby, thus completing the sealing. The baby was still crying with a seal on his belly shining in a majestic blue glow. Irizen rushed to the baby and saw that an unexpected event had just occurred. "IMO." The surprised Irizen spoke in a low voice. This was most unexpected. How could this have happened? One of the Zumbu burst into the camera and approached Irizen and Sandaime-sama, who Yubi has left, and also Yondaime Okage. The sealing was a success, and no. Irizen sighed to himself and spoke. Yes, it was a success. However, the Kyuubi was not the one that was sealed in Naruto. This revelation greatly alarmed the Zumbu who were present. And Sandaime-sama. "And you mean the Kyuubi is still out there?" "I don't know what happened to Kyuubi. However, I know it was from Yondaime." The Ambu eagerly wanted Sarutobi's answer. It was sealed on his own son, Konoha. A week later, Sarutobi and Ruzen, the reinstalled Sandaime Okage, was sitting in his office, with reports from all the Hounen and Chunin, who gave their detailed reports on the event of the Kyuubi attack. The victims of the attack were catastrophic, and the 3's body count and the search for missing persons were still ongoing. Many lost their lives that night of men, women, and children, and many of the best shinobi in Konoha. Many were left orphaned, widowed or widowed. The physical, mental and emotional damage caused to Konoha left countless traumatized, some homeless because their homes were destroyed. Others without families, and all despite overwhelmed by the horrible event that happened to them for unknown reasons. Still, they had to get on with their lives, or what was left of them, and look to a better future. As Irizen continued with his paperwork, he turned his attention to the sleeping Naruto, who was resting peacefully in his crib. He sighed in wonder at how Yondaime Okage ended up being sealed in his own son with a jutsu that was meant to seal and imprison the Kurobi no Yoko in Naruto. "I had no idea what could have happened seconds before Kinjutsu took effect. But if anything was for sure, Kirby was gone, and there have been no reports about the big fox's presence anywhere, much to everyone's relief. Sandame got up from the chair and approached the sleeping baby, looking at the blonde-haired boy in amazement as he asked himself, "Yandame, what exactly happened during your fight with Kyubi? How did it end up that they sealed you up? What happened to that nine-tailed monstrosity?" Sarutobi continued to stare at the boy in amazement as he recalled what happened a few hours after Kyubi's defeat. Flashback. A week ago, 2 hours have passed since Kyubi's defeat, and the consequences were affecting people. Meanwhile, Sandame was in the meeting room with all the advisors and clan leaders. The Zambu who were in the previously undisclosed chamber with Irizen were also present and mounting guard. Naruto was sleeping peacefully. In Sandame's arms, they were discussing the problems related to Yandame's only son and living heir and what they should do with him. Sarutobi had just finished explaining in detail what happened to Yandame and how he was sealed in the body of his newborn son. Needless to say, they were speechless. After a long moment of silence, Yashi broke the silence. "Are you really serious, Sandame-sama?" "I am very serious," Irizen replied. The kinjutsu that Yandame performed was intended to seal Kyubi in Naruto, and ultimately claim Yandame's life for performing the kinjutsu. However, for reasons that are not yet known, Yandame himself was ironically the victim of his own jutsu, and was sealed in his own son. There are numerous possibilities of the effects that the sealing of Yandame in Naruto will have on the child as he creates. For what it's worth, Naruto is practically a born Hokage. Sarutobi looked around as the advisors and the clan leaders muttered to each other about what they had just told them. The idea of a newborn baby being infused with everything that made Yandame Hokage, a most powerful and feared shinobi in the shinobi world, was unreal. But one clearly said Sandame Hokage himself. The possibilities and potentials of this son of Yonda and Maisama are almost unlimited, he recognized, and so, in some respects, Namikaze Naruto is the reincarnation of Yonda and Maisama. You might see it from this one. In that way, Sandame said, however, Naruto is Minato's son, not Minato is reborn, despite the situation the child is in. The boy possesses great powers, passed down from father to son, in a strange twist, Koru said. Nodding, Irizen said. That is also why he is in grave danger if the enemy nations and villages find out that Minato is sealed inside his own son. One of the extremes could happen. Enemy nations and villages would more for our look for the child, most likely, kidnap him to raise and train him to be a part of their nation, and turn him against us. The results would be disastrous for Kono Agakure. If they corrupt Minato's legacy, Naruto will need protection of the highest level. And Ruzen looked at all the clan leaders and advisors talking among themselves about what could be done for Naruto. A couple of minutes later, it was already talked about, Dame-sama, with all due respect, requested permission to adopt and raise Minato's heir, establishing him as part of the Yuga family's main house. Hearing those words, Sarutobi contemplated what might happen if he entrusted Naruto's tutelage and education to one of the clan leaders. Upon seeing their faces, he noticed that each of them, even Omura and Koru, were more than willing to adopt and raise Yandame's only child without hesitation. However, for one who was visualizing about the possible upbringing of Naruto under his wings, the results did not seem at all attractive. When he visualized what could happen if Naruto was raised by Yashi as part of the main branch, he saw Naruto learning a lot from the Yuga clan as a whole. It was true that Naruto would have been trained in the best arts. However, Yashi's hard and cold behavior was no secret to Saruto. And he also saw Naruto adopt and reflect such behavior. Combining that with being trained in the Yuga arts and Minato's combat arts, Naruto would become ruthless and look at everyone else as inferior to E1. These are not good qualities for an Hokage. Looking at the leader of the Uchiha's clan, Sarutobi also saw Naruto learning a lot from them. However, just like the Hyuga clan, the Uchiha clan was a proud clan due to the power behind the limit of their bloodline. And due to their arrogance, it saw Naruto having fierce rivalries with the prodigies, Uchiha, and looking to prove who would come out as the dominant figure. Especially since Naruto didn't possess his bloodline limit or anyone else's. With the Nara clan, he saw Naruto become a more strategic and lethal assassin. As the Nara clan was known to be very skilled in efficient tactics and strategies of battle, especially with his ability to manipulate his shadows. After a long mental deliberation, Hiruzen said, "I sincerely appreciate your thoughtfulness and mind open by being willing to adopt the child, and so, however, I must respectfully decline the offer." Yashi's eyes widened upon hearing this and he spoke. "Sandai Maesama, Naruto has great potential to become one of the strongest shinobi in Konoha, and with him under my tutelage, he would become one of the greatest prodigies and Hokages ever produced by Konoha. I recognize your good intentions for the boy Yashi, and for anyone else here who is willing to take on the responsibilities of taking Naruto under his wings." Sandai sighed at me and continued, "However, Naruto needs balance in his life. He has already been infused with a powerful Hokage whose knowledge, wisdom, endurance and skills will possibly be absorbed by the child in a gradual process as he grows up, no doubt. Because of this, he will need someone to balance him for the child's best intentions. I will send one of the Zambu here to locate someone of my choice to raise and teach the heir of my Nada." And so he remained reluctantly silent. Now was not the time to argue with the reinstalled Hokage, especially after everything that happened before and after Kyuubi's attack. "And we must inform the villagers about Yandame's surviving heir?" Mura asked. "No," Hiruzen replied firmly without a hint of hesitation in his voice. "If people found out that Namikaze Naruto is Minato's only son, the chances of Naruto being spoiled and pampered by the villagers would be unquestionably high. Be ungrateful and show little appreciation for the things that are given to you. But the opposite result would be if you learned from earning what rightfully belongs to you than simply handing over your inheritance to you. In addition, you should remember that Minato has earned many enemies in many lands, villages, and possibly on other continents. And as I mentioned before, if the enemy villages found out that Sandame has an heir infused with Minato himself, the results would be disastrous for both the child and the entire village of Konoha." Everyone in the chamber allowed Sandame's wisely chosen words to be absorbed while they thought about what he was saying for this reason. Hiruzen continued, "The child's name will be changed. She will adopt her mother's maiden name, as Minato instructed before her battle with Kyuubi. His new name will be Uzumaki Naruto. Everyone will be told that Minato and his entire family have died zero as a result of Kyuubi's attack. When Naruto grows up and reaches a level of maturity that I consider appropriate with the ability to take care of himself, he will be given everything that belongs to his family, and with the truth about his inheritance will be explained publicly to people." Everyone present nodded their heads in understanding, and Ruthin remained momentarily silent while allowing everyone to let his words sink into their minds. With a more serious and firm tone, Hiruzen continued, "Until that time, no one here will make any mention to anyone outside the council regarding the truth about Naruto's true heritage without my or Naruto's consent. If these words of mine are not honored, the act will be considered as treason, and the punishment will be severe. This is my law as the reinstated Hokage. The clan leaders and the advisors knew that they should not take Sandame's words lightly, especially if they did not want to incur his wrath." End of the flashback. Sarutobi sighed again while thinking about what happened after the meeting. Flashback. A week ago, Hiruzen, 3 hours after the meeting with the advisors and clan leaders, had convened the grand assembly of all in Konoha. Many of the attendees could only wonder what he had to tell them and Lucen regarding the attack and the defeat of Kyuubi Yoko. Many murmurs circulated around the assembly until Sandame appeared on the roof of the Hokage Tower, drawing everyone's attention. People calmed down immediately after seeing Sandame Hokage take the stage. "People of Konohagakure no Sato," Sandame addressed everyone. "As you all know, a big monster known as Kyuubi Yoko has attacked our village for reasons unknown to us. Unfortunately, many of our people and shinobi have lost their lives in fighting the Kyuubi, and many parts of our village have been left in ruins. I am deeply saddened that this has happened to us. Such a terrible event of such evil," and Lucen paused for a moment while looking at everyone in the audience. Taking a breath, he continued, "Kyuubi would have continued his rampage had it not been for the sacrifice made by Yandame Okage, who disappeared and died in moments. After defeating Kyubi no Yoko, it also pains me to inform all of you that Yandame's honorable wife Namikaze Kushina was also killed during the attack. Again, Sandame paused and looked at the faces of everyone who was there. He knew how everyone loved his successor, and even his wife Kushina, and Sandame was no exception. The villagers knew that his wife was pregnant and were looking forward to the birth of Yandame's child with high expectations. Although it was true that Minato Morichiro's wife, however, it hurt her to have to make everyone believe that both Minato and her son were dead, but it was for Naruto's own protection. And Ruzan continued, yes, the loss of Minato and his family is indeed a great loss. And with all those who lost their lives in it this tragic night. But their deaths were not in vain. Minato and all the brave shinobi and citizens of Konohagakure who died gave their lives to protect the village and all their loved ones. Therefore, their deaths were honorable and should be commemorated. Despite everything that has happened here tonight, the fact that the village continues to exist testifies to the brilliant will of the fire that burns in all of us. A fire that will not be extinguished in the shadows of the night by going the enemy forces. And tonight's events have demonstrated this truth to all of us. And although we will never be able to recover the lives of those who were lost in the battle, nevertheless, we can honor their sacrifices and losses, rebuilding Konohagakure no Sato for a brighter tomorrow. In this way, the next generation of Konoha, and all future generations, will learn from the great ones. Things that their people and ancestors have done for them and their village, and will proudly lift their spirits, and their ardent village will. All the villagers burst into applause after hearing Sandame's words. Needless to say, people took all one seriously or said. End of the flashback. Sarutobi blurted out his thoughts when someone knocked on the door. What if? You can come in. The door opened, revealing a masked Ambo standing in the doorway. Sandai Mesama, the Ambo spoke as he bowed respectfully. The one you have sent has arrived, and Zusina felt with her head towards the Ambo, giving him permission to allow the visitor to enter his office. The visitor entered the office with the Ambo going out and out of the office, giving privacy to both Sandame and her guest, who did not have a happy facial expression. Sandame knew this meeting wasn't going to be easy. Office. Ryokaige. Sandame and his guest looked at each other momentarily, without words being exchanged between them. After a brief moment of silence between the two, Sandame spoke, Senju Tsunade, it's been a long time. Yes, he has, Sarutobi-sensei, Tsunade replied to her former sensei. She was currently nearing 30, and many knew her as the Tsuker, one of the legendary Shani. Tsunade commented, the Ambo you sent to look for me told me that a terrible event happened here a week ago. Judging by the damage and people's looks, I would say that many more things have happened than what the Ambo was willing to let it go and look. He also told me that there was another important matter here, that it was a matter of the utmost importance, that requires my presence before you. He would not tell me what he was saying, that Saul, you could tell me, as it was very important. Confidential for my ears only. Pause momentarily. In truth, I really did not want to return to this village again, although I did so reluctantly, since you personally requested my audience. And Ruzan sighed. I understand that a lot of things have happened in your life that have made you bitter to your hometown, and I won't make any excuses about it. Before Tsunade said another word, her eyes caught sight of a baby's crib that was next to Irizan's office. Curiously, he approached the crib and looked inside it, seeing a 1-week-old baby sleeping peacefully inside. Her mood began to improve when she saw the child. Smiling at the newborn, he asked his former sensei, who is the cute baby with blonde hair. He certainly can't be your grandson, and no. You're right, he's not my grandson, Irizan replied. His name is Naruto, and he is the son and heir of Yandame. The Sanin's eyes opened with surprise upon hearing those words. Minato had a son, Tsunade said, surprised and happy, talking about Minato. Where are he and his wife Kushina? And he's Yandame on some diplomatic business trip in another village with you covering him here special. After everything that happened, here where the child's mother is, Tsunade saw a certain expression on Sarutobi's face, which was a bad omen. Tsunade, began Irizan, I humbly ask you to adopt Minato's son. That's when he looked at his old sensei and thought that if he lost his mind. "Do you want me to do what?" Tsunade screamed, causing Naruto to wake up and start crying. And Ruzan sighed again as he reached out to Naruto, lifting him out of his crib and into his arms, finally calming the child down. "Adopt Minato's son," Tsunade asked in disbelief. "Have you lost your mind?" "I did exactly." "Where are Minato and his wife?" "Tsunade," Iruzen replied quickly, interrupting Tsunade. "Please calm down, Tsunade." In a calmer tone, he suggested, "Have a seat, Tsunade. There's something I have to tell you. It's sad to say that it's not going to wear you down. Like what you're going to hear." Having no other choice, Tsunade took a seat and sat down, as advised by her former sensei. And Ruzan pulled his office seat closer to his former student and sat on it with Naruto still curled up in his arms. And Ruzan started explaining a week ago. The big monster known as Kubino Yoko came and attacked the village. Days before the monster's attack, however, Minato received news from one of his top shinobi about Kyuubi's eventual arrival in Konoha. "Like you, I know very well, Tsunade, Kubino's existence was a myth. For Konoha Gakure, even before his attack. People knew what the monster was capable of after hearing many stories about the power of the beast. However, many could not understand why Kyuubi was coming to attack Konoha, killing Zero and destroying everything in his path. While on his way to our village, Minato worked day and night trying to find ways to stop the creature, but had little success. It was a deep burden for him, and the fact that his wife was about to have a premature birth. Due to the great stress and frustration they were both in was not there. Helping, in truth, the villagers knew that Minato was married to a very skilled kunoichi who was pregnant with his child. What they don't know is that she went into labor prematurely. Due to the intense stress both she and her husband were under on the night of Kyuubi's attack. She was secretly taken to a private medical clinic during the attack where she gave birth to her son. However, unfortunately, due to his wife's severe emotional distress and her weakened condition, Kushina Morichiro. Shortly after giving birth to Naruto, and the news of his wife's death devastated Minato Tsunade, he was already feeling that tears. They were gathering in his eyes before they started to fall freely down his face. Sarutobi continued, and what added more pain to Minato was the ancient Yuji Kinjutsu that he finally found to seal and imprison the Kubino Yoko. However, the beast was too powerful to seal. Contained in any inorganic animal container. This Yuji Kinjutsu required a newborn human child whose umbilical cord was freshly cut. And there was no other child born that night except his. When performing the Kinjutsu, the sealer would have to give up his life for the Yuji Kinjutsu to take its effects. Unfortunately, he could still remember the wrecking expression on Minato's face when he saw that all his life. Even if there was another child born that night, Minato would not have asked any parent to sacrifice his child or even a child born that same night. He became an orphan simultaneously after losing his parents as a result of Kyuubi's attack. In such a hard burden, especially if he himself was unwilling to do it with his own child. Therefore, he used and sacrificed his own newborn son and his own life for the ritual of sealing the Kyuubi. It was a tragic and cruel act, a burden that broke Yandame's heart, knowing that he lost everything he loved in one night for the preservation of Konoha Gakure, and preventing Kyuubi from doing more destruction and killing than he had already done. Tsunade started sobbing as more tears ran down her face. Hearing this story made her hate Okage's position even more as she lost her loved ones, who were somehow related to Okage's title. Iruzen himself could not help but let some of his own tears. They fell from his face as he recounted the horrible event in detail. He wiped the tears that were falling on Naruto's face before continuing. Before Minato went to fight the Kyuubi, he asked me for a private moment alone with Naruto. I respected his wish, although I stayed close enough to the store to listen to the ed that Yandame said. While alone with his son in the store, Minato allowed some of the tears it contained to fall freely, while cradling Naruto in his arms, apologizing and telling him that this was not what he wanted for Yuno. But Yandame knew it shouldn't be because of the monster that attacked and ruined all her dreams. Yandame knew that he had to do something, as it was his duty as an Hokage and as a father to protect Konoha Gakure to do. Surely his son had a future in the town he loved so much. Namikaze Naruto, my son, you will be the hero who defeated Kubino Yoko and saved Konohagakure no Sarto. Minato whispered to Naruto before calling me to explain what he wanted me to do. Yandai made it very clear to me that she didn't want the villagers to know about her son's existence, at least not yet. Originally, his intention was for Naruto to be considered as the great hero who saved Konoha, sealing and imprisoning Kyuubi. On him, the boy's name was changed from Namikaze Naruto to Uzumaki Naruto. He was giving her mother's maiden name to protect her true identity and heritage. Although he wished there was another way to take down Kyuubi, he knew he had to pay a severe price to stop the creature. Naruto was to be turned into living sacrifice with his father, giving his life to save Konoha and everyone who lives here. Tsunade didn't want to hear the story anymore. Her heart was breaking. It was too tragic and horrible to bear. Before he could step in and tell his old sensei to stop telling him the story, and Ruzan added. However, the situation had taken an unexpected turn after the kinjutsu was performed. Tsunade's head shot up when she heard what her former sensei said. He continued. A very strong chakra made its way to Naruto and was infused into the belly of the child. However, this chakra was not red as we had anticipated. Rather, it was blue. No one knows what happened to Kyuubi after kinjutsu. He was initiated, but one thing is for sure. Yondaime was sealed in Naruto. The Sanin's eyes opened with surprise, prey and absolute disbelief. She remained silent, while her former sensei allowed her to process everything he had told her so far. A moment later, Sandaime continued. No one else outside the village council, besides you and some Ambu, who have been sworn to secrecy. They know that. By one or that the rest of the villagers know, Yondaime, his wife and his son are dead. Along with many others who lost their lives during the attack. Tsunade was speechless from everything she was hearing. It was so overwhelming, both mentally and emotionally. I didn't know how much more I could handle, and I knew Irizen wasn't done. As a result of this unexpected turn of events, the council and I realized that the situation regarding Naruto has changed drastically. With the guy who has Minato sealed in his being, there is no doubt that he will undergo certain changes. Physical and psychological in your body. He developed and acquired all, if not most, of everything that made Yonda and Miokai the man and the shinobi he met in Konoha. And the rest of the shinobi world. Do you mean that Minato will take over the body of his own son? Tsunade asked in disbelief. No, Irizen replied quickly to reassure him. Rather, Naruto will inherit and absorb his father's knowledge, wisdom, stamina, abilities and chakra in a gradual process. As he grows up, basically becoming a born Hokage. The child will remain yours. Individual person, not Yondaime incarnate. Because of this, Naruto is in more danger than before. It would have been quite difficult if we had let everyone know that Minato had a surviving child. With countless people looking to spoil, pamper or adopt the child for their own intentions and possibly to take over Naruto's huge inheritance, is worse now with Yondaime sealed inside him. And if the enemy villages and nations find out this secret, one of the two worst scenarios could happen. 1. They could try to murder the child, or 2, which they will most likely try to kidnap the child and raise him to be a part of his nation, thus corrupting the child and making him our enemy. Either scenario would be disastrous for Konoha and Naruto, and perhaps for other villages and nations if they crossed paths. Sandaime took a moment to look at Naruto, who was now fully awake and looking around the environment that Na was so familiar with. Sighing, Sandai continued to me. The truth is that I would have gladly taken it upon myself to raise the child and guide his education. However, my reinstatement as an Hokage greatly limits the amount of time that I can happen with the child, and I can't trust anyone in the village, not even the clan leaders or the village elders. And the last thing we need is for Naruto to become Orochimaru. I don't want history to repeat itself with Naruto turning into something maybe worse than Orochimaru himself. Tsunade remained silent. The memory and the pain of Orochimaru's betrayal were still fresh in his mind. Jiraiya is not the type to raise small children, and his role as the author of those books that you hated so passionately would not help in the development of the child for once. I agree with you, Tsunade commented. Swim, although you're being a bit of a hypocrite, since you also read those books like some closet perverts. I know, annoyed by your comment. Sarutobi cleared his throat and continued with a more serious demeanor. The fact that I am asking you to adopt and raise Yonda's child, and it shows me the amount of conviction and faith that I have in your ability to curiosity, control and balance the child, since he was infused with a powerful Hokage. But still, Naruto is an innocent child who has been forced to carry this heavy burden without his consent. She needs someone who can properly nurture and secure her guardianship, and show her maternal affection on top of that. I am more than sure that you can also teach him the advanced arts of medical and healing jutsus. Tsunade listened to a lot more than she was negotiating. It was too much. Overwhelming for her at that moment. Sandaime knew that she had already been through a lot of things in Konoha, and the fact that she had lost most of her loved ones, including her grandfather and great-uncle, Shadaime, and Nidaime, her lover and little brother, they both wanted to become. In Hokage, he left her with bitterness for his native village. After finding out what became of Yondaime and her family, and the village as a whole, it was too much. And now her former sensei asks her to adopt and raise Yondaime's child or cage as if it were her own. I need some time to think about this, Tsunade admitted honestly with a demeanor very calm with mixed emotions in his voice. And Ruzan did not argue with her and understandably responded. I understand, Tsunade. Take all the time you need. Tsunade approached Sarutobi, indicating that she wanted to hug the child. Obeying, he handed over to Boruto. Akuno held the wide-awake child in her arms, who seemed to be staring at her in amazement. He yawned and closed his eyes for a moment before looking back at her. He's only a week old, and you already have to carry such a heavy load, Tsunade said softly to Naruto, as some tears slid down her face as he gurgled. Hiruzen smiled and watched the scene in silence. Mother and son, seeing his former student smiling happily at what he hopes will be his next adopted child, made Hiruzen suddenly feel overwhelmed by an overwhelming sense of hope for the future. It was strange how, even after the gloomiest of days, he had found such a brilliant view. I didn't know what the future held for these two, but I was grateful that Tsunade was at least willing to consider adopting the child. Later that night, Tsunade was staying at a hotel for the night, at least one that was not demolished or damaged during Kyuubi's attack. He got little rest that night as he thought about everything that happened that afternoon at Sandaime's office. He spent the rest of the day thinking about everything that his former sensei had explained to him in detail and what he was asking of him. In truth, he felt that he didn't owe the village any favors, especially after everything he suffered and went through in the village. However, Naruto was a completely different story. He was an innocent child who has been overwhelmingly overwhelmed by so much at a very tender and fragile age. She's only a week old, Tsunade thought to herself, as she sat on her bed with her kimono to sleep in. It was true that many other Kono children besides Naruto had suffered a great loss due to that nine-tailed monster bastard. However, Naruto was a very special case. Despite what happened to all the other children who may have lost their parents, families, and friends during the attack, they still had the opportunity to rebuild their lives from scratch and start a new life in the village with the help of their fellow villagers and Sandaime Naruto. On the other hand, I couldn't do it like that, especially because it was infused with Yondaime Hokage. Two of his relatives were the first two Hokages they built with Ogakure no Sato, and they died young. His little brother and his lover, Dan, wanted to become Hokage because of his intense love for the village and his strong desire to protect it, and they both died young before they could fulfill their wishes. Now you are asked to adopt and raise a newborn child of only 1 week old who will inevitably grow and mature into a strong Hokage at an unknown young age, that is, if the child lives long enough for him to be. Let it happen. Life is so cruel to me with its ironies, she thought to herself, while meditating on Naruto's current situation, while playing with the necklace around his neck. The one that once belonged to his grandfather, Senhua Shirama, Shadai Myokai. Most likely, Naruto will not be able to live a normal life as a result of the changes he will undergo. Besides that, all his father's enemies will now become his enemies, and his father has earned many enemies. Before and after becoming Yonda and Myokai somehow, The boy was going to become the new Yonda Maikai that she imagined. And it was unknown how Naruto would turn out, as he would develop his own personality, which will undoubtedly be influenced by some of his father's characteristics. Naruto is an innocent child who has been forced to carry this heavy burden without his consent. She needs someone who can properly raise and ensure her guardianship, and in addition to showing her maternal affection. Those were Izusan's exact words to her. Tsunade wondered if she was capable of playing the role of a mother because she never had children. Surely she helped midwives and nursing mothers with their children in hospitals and watched how they took care of their babies. But actually playing the role of raising a baby is a completely different story, she acknowledged, and she has never raised children before. After the death of her lover Dan, before they had a chance to get married, she lost most of her interests and desires to get married and have children. And now Iruzen asks her to adopt and raise a child who will inevitably become a new Yondaime Hokage. And Tsunade came out of her thoughts while he was thinking when he heard a knock on the door. Turning to the door, he said, "Yes." "Tsunade-sensei," replied a gem, in a feminine voice from the other side of the door. "May I come in?" Sighing, Tsunade replied, "You can enter, Shizune." The 15-year-old girl entered her sensei's room. Shinuz entered his sensei's room and approached her. "Are you okay, Tsunade-sensei?" Shizune asked, worried. Tsunade looked at the young woman and said, "I'm fine." "Why are you awake?" "I can ask the same of you," Shizune commented. Tsunade said nothing as she looked away from the young woman. Seeing the expression on the older woman's face, Shizune asked, "Is there something on your mind?" "Besides what Sandaime told me," Tsunade commented. "Not much he told you." Shizune asked, "Do you want to talk about that?" Tsunade turned to the young teenager. After what seemed like an eternity, Tsunade spoke with a serious tone. "Before I tell you, you must swear that I would never repeat what I'm going to tell you to no one outside this room." Shizune felt the firmness of his sensei's voice and realized that what was on his mind was not a cause for laughter or something to take lightly. Shizune replied truthfully, "And I swear. And I give you my most sincere word." After taking a breath, Tsunade started telling Shizune everything in full detail about everything she was told about Izune. Shizune listened intently, while her sensei told her the story without interruptions. What the young woman heard surprised her a lot, and Tsunade had more to tell her. Shizune already had tears streaming down her face with some sobs, as she listened to the harsh and tragic tale about Yondaime and her son, Naruto. This heartbreaking revelation, it was beyond anything I expected to hear. Tsunade herself let a few tears fall from her face before wiping them away. After Tsunade finished telling Shizune the full story about Yondaime and Boruto, she gave the young teenager some time to absorb everything she was told. A few moments later, Shizune regained her composure as she wiped the tears from her face, turned to her sensei, and asked, "So no one knows what happened to Kirubino Kitsune?" Tsunade shook her head. "It's not that anyone is complaining. However, it generates some concern, at least for the Hokage, and for me, but will you adopt baby Naruto for me?" "I've been thinking about that since I left the office," Tsunade admitted. "I haven't decided exactly whether I should or not." "Why not?" Shizune asked. "It's not like you're handling it on your own. You will have me here to help you take care of the child. Besides, I've always wanted a little brother." "And who wouldn't? Do you want a little brother who is an Hokage?" Tsunade looked at her young apprentice with a blank expression. Realizing his words, Shizune immediately apologized. "Tsunade-sensei, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings and reopen old wounds. I mean what I meant to say." It's okay, Shizune," Tsunade assured, knowing full well that Shizune was referring to her late younger brother. "I know you weren't trying to offend me. You just got caught up in the moment, that's all. But still, adopting this particular child will not be a walk in the park. Hell, adopting and raising any child is not a walk in the park and will require a lot of sacrifices." Tsunade saw the irony with the word sacrifice, especially since Naruto was originally going to become a living sacrifice to protect all future generations of Konoha and everyone else. Shizune. However, Tsunade continued, Naruto is not just any child that can be adopted and raised by just anyone. I am surprised that Sarutobi sends and has sent one of his and to look for me to ask me to raise the child as if it were my own son. Sigh, I'm not even sure if I'm mother material. Don't say such things, Tsunade-sensei. Shizune replied with conviction. Sure, you're not perfect, and you have some bad habits, but hey. No one is perfect, and we all have our share of problems. But I have been with enough time to know that you would be a great mother for that child, and also Sandra and Maisama. After all, he wouldn't have gone through so much trouble to find you if you thought that you were unsuitable or not apartment to raise Naruto. Or any other Nizo for that matter. The Hokage chose you, Tsunade-sensei, out of all the people, shinobi, clan leaders and village elders to raise this child, who possesses untold potential. Of course he could have chosen any other mother in the village to adopt Naruto, however, he saw something very special in you, Tsunade-sensei, that maybe you haven't seen in yourself, to make him believe so strongly that you are able to become the one of Naruto. New mom. I firmly believe that I would be her Amidra. Great for any child, with Sanjin or not. And I know your little brother and Uncle Dan would have felt the same way about you. Tsunade stood there in amazement. To Shizune. His words felt in the heart were full of wisdom, beyond his age. The older woman was amazed that her young apprentice could make her see and recognize something like this. Thank you, Shizune, Tsunade said appreciatively, as she wiped the new tears that were falling from her eyes before smiling. I really needed to hear that. And those words coming from you really mean a lot to me. Shizune smiled, knowing that she managed to heal herself and restore her sensei's self-confidence. What the two women did not know was that there was someone listening to the whole conversation from behind the door. The revelation that baby Naruto possessed Yondaime Hokage inside him and eventually acquired Yondaime's attributes greatly intrigued the intruder. The possibilities with this new Yonda and Myokai are truly unique, the intruder thought before quietly leaving before being detected. Hours later that night. Elsewhere, in an undisclosed location, Naruto was peacefully sleeping in one guarded room outside with two Ambu. No one without the permission of the Hokage himself was allowed to enter the room. 15 minutes later, the Ambu saw Sandaime heading towards them. Sandaime-sama, the Ambu said as the two bowed respectfully to the elder Hokage, who nodded and greeted him. Is everything okay here? Sandaime asked. The first Ambu replied. Uzumaki Naruto is resting quietly, sir. No problem has arisen, Sandaime-sama. That's good to hear, Sandaime replied. Now I would like to see how the child is doing. The Ambu felt and stepped aside as Sandaime entered the room, before closing the door behind him. Sandaime then silently walked over to Naruto's crib and looked at the young man, before forming a sinister smile on his face. After a while, the two Sambu waited outside the room for Sandaime to come out. While they were waiting, a voice behind them asked, "And is everything okay here?" The two Sambu quickly turned surprised to see Sandaime approaching them, with the two Sambu following him too. He will relieve his compass to the Ambu of his watch. That Sandaime-sama, exclaimed the second Ambu confused, didn't you just enter the room a while ago? Within seconds, Sarutobi registered what had just happened, when his eyes opened with horror and shock. What? Sandaime exclaimed before running towards the door, finding it closed. Mert 4, Sandaime cursed before breaking down the door, storming into the room, with the four Ambus following them. They came to see an empty crib and an open window. Whoever entered the room impersonated him, using an Engenojutsu and kidnapped Naruto. But the question was who and how did he find out about Naruto? This was exactly the situation that Sendai was afraid would happen to me, and to his horror. This secret did not take long to come out somehow. Turning to the four Imbusanda, and ordered me with full authority. And close the village and place as many Jounins and Chounins at all the exit ports of the village as you can. Gather all the Ambus and explain to them that Naruto has been kidnapped. And search the village. And search everywhere. And I want Naruto found, and the kidnapper brought back alive for interrogation. And we need to find out if he or she is working alone, or with an accomplice. Alas, the four Ambu complied, by disappearing in a puff of smoke. Turning to the empty crib, Sendai thought to me. This is exactly it. Which had the enemy forces coming at us during our weakest and most vulnerable moments, right after a most catastrophic event. Yondaime, for the sake of your son, and for the sake of the whole village, I hope they find Naruto and bring him back safely and quickly. Meanwhile, Tsunade was having a hard time sleeping with all the commotion outside. He covered his head with the pillow to try to drown out the noise, but to no avail. Frustrated, she got up, went to her bedroom door and opened it. However, as he was leaving, he stepped on something with his bare feet. Looking at the door, she saw something that wasn't in the apartment before, that didn't belong to her or Shizune. It was a letter paper that had the names of the clans and organizations written down. Someone was here, Tsunade realized. A moment later, Shizune ran towards the apartment and approached her sensei. "Tsunade-sensei," Shizune shouted. Turning to the young woman, Tsunade asked, "What is it?" "All the departure ports have been sealed," Shizune explained, "and the village is completely closed by order of the Okage. And from what I've heard, there's been a kidnapping of some kind." It hit Tsunade like a ton of rocks as she looked at the letter paper in her hands. Holding the paper tightly until it crumbled in his fist angrily, Tsunade said, "And wait here." Without waiting for an answer, Tsunade stormed out of the apartment. "Tsunade-sensei," Shizune shouted, but her screams fell on deaf ears as Tsunade quickly got out, running to chase and stop the kidnapper. She didn't mind the fact that she was barefoot and still in her sleep kimono. All he cared about was getting there and rescuing Naruto on time. From breaking an entrance to her private accommodation, to kidnapping the newborn she was supposed to adopt, for what it's worth. The culprit of these crimes has just provoked her ire. That night, the Zanbu were sent to rescue and bring back Naruto by any means necessary. The villagers had no idea what was going on, as Ambu conducted exhaustive search in everyone's houses. Restaurants, shops, clubs, taverns, wherever they could think. Among the Ambu in the search was a teenager named Kakashi Attack, who lost his sensei and teacher, Yonda and Miyokai. A week ago, before Kubino Yoko. He was still affected by the event and the loss of his teacher, although he tried not to show it. Kakashi already knew who Naruto really was and why he was kidnapped. He wasted no time or energy in searching for his master's son, determined to locate and return Naruto. And protect him. Kakashi, with all the and, had to take an oath of secrecy, not to reveal Naruto. Meanwhile, HAREM and Chunin were under direct orders from him. Okage that no one could enter or leave Konoha until the search was over. It was no secret to anyone that something very big had happened upon seeing that Sandaime Okage ordered a massive blockade. And a search of this magnitude, if anything, was the last thing they needed, especially because Kyuubi's attack was only a week ago and practically no one was cured. Meanwhile, a very beautiful woman with brown eyes, long hair, blonde and a very slender and well-built figure, and big breasts ran and jumped from roof to roof at full speed. Like a real athletic shinobi. Although she already realized that she was barefoot, and only with her sleeping kimono that flew with the wind and the movements of her body. At this moment it was of little importance. For her, all she cared about was getting to Naruto, and fast. After seeing the names written on that piece of paper he found in his hotel apartment, to say that the kidnapper was up to no good was an understatement. Taking a break at the top of one of the buildings to catch his breath momentarily, Tsunade scanned the area to see if there was anything that looked out of place. So far, all he saw was the Zanbu searching all the buildings they entered, and the HAREM and Chunin remaining at their posts. The search for Naruto had lasted almost an hour, and the kidnapper was still at large. He decided to head to where Naruto was last seen. Elsewhere, some of the other Ambu were searching around the room Naruto was in earlier, to see if the culprit left any clues that might provide a clue. Where could he have fled from after kidnapping Naruto? Tsunade jumped from one of the roofs of the building and landed gracefully on the surface, running towards the small house that once housed Naruto. Stealthily, he searched around the outside section of the small house, looking for anything he could find. To serve as a clue, so far she found nothing, which served to frustrate her. She knew the kidnapper couldn't have gotten too far with all the Zambu chasing him in an all-out chase. His ears soon caught a conversation between two Zambu. They were chatting among themselves about how the kidnapper used an Engenojutsu to trick his two Ambu comrades into believing that he or she was Sandaime. It was then that she realized that the kidnapper would not have so foolishly tried to escape from the village so quickly, with all the Ambu behind him or her. Most likely, he or she was hiding somewhere in the village. Leaving the scene, Tsunade went to look for anything that seemed out of place in the village. The Zambu kept looking everywhere, without success. 3 hours have passed, and no one has seen either the criminal or the child anywhere. The Jounins reported that no one at the stations tried to leave or enter the village. Sandaime was getting more and more frustrated as he was angry, but he managed to keep a calm attitude. Tsunade decided to redo her search completely, while running and jumping from roof to roof. As he moved, his eyes fell on a particular young Ambu whose name was Kakashi. She remembered who student Kakashi was and his status among the Ambu. He was about to take off when something caught his attention. Some of the other Ambos approached him and asked him why he deviated from the place where the search was assigned to him. He made a quick excuse before taking off to do his job while the other Zambu went on their way. Tsunade decided to secretly follow Kakashi and see where he was going. As he continued to follow Kakashi, he noticed that he was heading in the wrong direction, completely deviating from where they had said what he was supposed to go. Something unprofessional about Wambu, who was supposed to know the Konoha routes inside and out. Something was going on, he realized as he continued to follow him in secret. She soon noticed that he entered a small cabin of some kind for a few moments, and came out with what looked like a backpack, full of extra search equipment. Kakashi then took off towards the main departure port, where he encountered two Jounins stationed at the port, recognizing their higher rank, and the explanation for him to start his search on the outskirts of the village. The two Jounins stepped aside as Kakashi ran out of the departure port. Tsunade saw this and gave way to the chase quickly before the Jounins noticed her presence and her departure. After a while, the same two Ambus went to regroup with 4 other Ambus, when they encountered a very familiar Ambu heading towards them with Sandaime. Kakashi, as the first Ambu, what are you doing here? And we didn't meet with you a while ago. What do you mean? Kakashi asked. I was with Sandaime-sama for the last hour. That's when Kakashi, Sandaime, and the other Ambu noticed. In which direction did you see that my other self ran? Kakashi asked as he, Sandaime, and the other Zambu made way to chase the fake. It was clear that this kidnapper was a clever and elusive deceiver, whoever it was. Meanwhile, Kakashi was running through the forest with a backpack, jumping from tree to tree at full speed. Tsunade was chasing Kakashi, but she kept a safe distance until she knew where she was going. As of now, they were a good distance from the village, and Tsunade didn't like where this was going. She soon saw him land in an open, clear field, but she stayed hidden among the trees as she watched. After making sure it was clear, Kakashi placed the backpack on the grass and dispelled the eng surrounding him. Kai, he said as the eng collapsed, revealing his true appearance. The man was wearing a standard Konoha Jounin uniform. He had brown hair and a Konoha forehead protector that had a cut that one crossed. Clearly, this shinobi is a lost ninja from Konoha, Tsunade realized. This helps explain how he was able to deceive and elude Jounin and Chuni. It could even be an Exambu. Tsunade soon saw that the binding on the backpack also dissipated, revealing nothing less than baby Naruto sleeping in a carrying basket, with 2 straps to place over his shoulders. The missing ninja looked at Naruto and said, Yondaime Okage, reduced to an inescapable captivity. Inside your own child, a suitable doom for people like you. I am sure I can get a high price from any village or clan who would love to buy his son. That's not going to happen, a female voice declared. Realizing that he was not alone, the missing ninja looked around and shouted, and who is there? And show yourself. As if on cue, Tsunade jumped out of the tree she was in and landed on the ground in front of her enemy. Her current beauty and appearance, however, was anything but one that the kidnapper was expecting. Seeing that she was barefoot and barely had anything on, besides her sleeping kimono, and the little fabric that was underneath with the wind blowing the kimono, the missing ninja fought hard to keep his composure and not suffer a massive nosebleed. Seeing her face, the kidnapper recognized who the blonde beauty was. Senju Tsunade, he said, one of the legendary shanons. I didn't expect to find you here just tonight. Dress. I didn't know you were that kind of kunoichi. Shut up, Tsunade retorted angrily. You're the one who broke into my hotel room. I did, he admitted. Tell me, though. And how did you know I broke into your apartment? You left traces of your intrusion, she replied, showing him a crumbled piece of paper, a list of clans, villages, and organizations. The missing ninja cursed for one down and replied. Originally, after I found out that you returned to Konoha, I was going to attack and kidnap you while you were sleeping, and sell your body to the highest bidder. However, after listening to the conversation between you and that girl regarding Yondaime and her son, I saw that kidnapping and selling the child instead would bring me more money than any Sanon's body. Bastard, Tsunade retorted as she got into a fighting position, and you will not leave this earth with the child. Oh, replied the missing ninja. And I guess you intend to stop me. Very well then, and I will take you out and sell you and the child. Performing some hand seals, the missing ninja said, Kara no Tsuyosa no Jutsu. Tsunade at that moment felt as if something had been ripped from her when she fell to the ground on her knees, and her left hand while holding his chest with his right hand was breathing hard, and he felt inexplicably weak all over his body. What did you do to me? To me? Tsunade growled as she forced herself up with the remaining strength she had left. Smiling ominously, the missing ninja said, I took away your super strength. I would be a fool if I thought I could face you directly in a match and think I would come out victorious while you are at your best. All I had to do was add to your tea before an elixir of my own creation and wait for the elixir to saturate in your body. It also neutralizes your chakra, preventing you from performing ninjutsu and genjutsu. As I said before, my original intentions were to attack and kidnap you while you were sleeping after I activated the poison. Damn you, Tsunade cursed, and it doesn't matter. And I will protect Naruto. Do you want this fight to start, or should I go first? The missing ninja smiled mockingly at him and placed a claw glove with long sharp steel blades on his right hand. The missing ninja said, since you insist on fighting. The missing ninja charged at Tsunade and held out his right hand to her. Tsunade dodged the attack quickly as he continued, attacking her. After a couple of minutes, Tsunade soon took the initiative and went after him. Before the Izing Nin took flight, Tsunade 1-0 hit, sending it through the ground. It's not that hard, Tsunade thought confidently. The missing ninja got up from the ground and looked at his opponent, seeing that she was ready to fight with ready fists to hit him all over. Charging forward, the missing ninja screamed and ran towards Tsunade, who was waiting for his legacy. Upon arriving, Tsunade jumped into the air and turned around behind the criminal shinobi. The missing ninja turned around in time to see Tsunade punch him in the face, knocking him down and pulling him away from her again. Did you really think you had a chance against a Sanin like me? The missing ninja let out a sinister laugh as he stood up again and said, well, if you want the answer so badly. I'm afraid your only way to get it is to try to beat it out of me, if you want and can. And do it your way. Tsunade charged at the ninja, disappeared while he was there, waiting for her. Tsunade prepared her fist to strike the kidnapper. However, the lost ninja stepped aside when Tsunade's fist missed the target. The criminal shinobi jumped to the side as Tsunade turned to look at him. He could clearly feel the strength he had left leaving his body as a result of the elixir absorbed into his body. Now yes, he had to keep fighting, not for his sake, but for Naruto's. Resorting to taijutsu, Tsunade charged the missing ninja, ready to launch her hurricane of punches and kicks. However, the missing ninja dodged and evaded every last one of his attacks as he kept getting closer. The Sanin woman kept going as she tried to hit her, but he was too fast for her as a result of the poison and the jutsu he used on her. The kidnapper jumped out of her and then quickly passed by her before her eyes could see him. "Here I am," the missing ninja shouted. Looking like an uncontrollable bull, the missing ninja pounced on Tsunade and crashed into her, pushed her off the ground, and flew some distance until she hit a tree. Hard, with a thud, Tsunade struggled for getting back up after feeling the raw impact of the last attack. His body was sore all over. Tsunade said weakly, "What the hell was that? It felt like a summoning beast had hit me." The missing ninja was standing where he was looking at the female shinobi, who was struggling to regain some of her strength. "What's the matter?" he scoffed. "I slapped you so hard." Tsunade hissed at him. "Triple O? You still have some fight left. I'll fix it." Tsunade charged at him again. Blow after blow, kick after kick. Tsunade kept trying to hit him, but she was unsuccessful as the jutsu kept exhausting her resistance. Missing Nin blocked and evaded all his attacks. Walking away, Tsunade took a moment to catch her breath, while the missing ninja was where he was looking at her with a mocking expression. "Is that all you got?" he scoffed. "If you can't catch your breath anymore, and I think now it's my turn to come for you." The missing ninja pounced on Tsunade and started attacking her. Tsunade did her best to block and evade as many of his attacks as she could. However, it was difficult for her to keep up as several of his punches and kicks found a way to hit her. Tsunade was now on the receiving end of all his quick and very quick punches and cuts with his claw gauntlet as he kept getting closer. She screamed every time because of the tremendous pain and damage that the steel claws inflicted on her. The missing ninja then gave her a round kick and sent her to the ground away from him. Tsunade stumbled and rolled on the ground, but finally stopped. I was in more pain now than before. His slender and silky body was covered with dirt and dry mud, and he had multiple bruises and cuts around his face and body was bleeding everywhere, and his sleeping kimono was torn and stained with his blood. "It's a pity that I had to destroy and desecrate such beauty," the missing ninja commented. Tsunade, although in a lot of pain, struggled to get back up to face her enemy. It took a while, but he managed to stand up again. "Ready for more?" the missing ninja teased. "You're dead," Tsunade growled. "You first." With the remaining strength he had left, Tsunade ran towards the missing ninja and started fighting with him again, trying to throw as many punches at him as she could. But it was in vain. She could not hit him once, while he kept dodging all her blows. The missing ninja then hit her as she fell to the ground. Then he screamed and ran towards her with the intention of hurting her more. Tsunade saw him jump and flip over in the air before he suddenly threw his feet down into a landing position to land on her feet first. Seeing this, Tsunade quickly rolled over and landed on the ground, only to see him jump back up and land on one of the tree branches. Finding where he was, Tsunade ran to one of the trees and climbed it to reach the same height as one. Then she pushed herself off the tree and threw herself at him in the tree where he was standing with his fist raised. The lost ninja was knocked out of the tree and fell directly to the ground on his back when Tsunade landed where he was standing earlier. Seeing where Tsunade was lying, he jumped off the branch with his feet in a grounding position to land on his chest. However, the missing ninja saw this, curved his legs back, and placed his feet up. Tsunade gasped when she saw this, but she couldn't escape when she landed on her feet. After making contact, the missing ninja pushed her back. In the air, Tsunade did a somersault in the air as she now started to descend from the air. The missing ninja turned up and saw Tsunade heading towards him. Before she could land, he rushed over and quickly jumped at her and gave her a solid kick in the chest, sending her flying straight into a tree nearby, which she crashed into before hitting the ground and staying there motionless. Seeing that she did not get back up, the lost ninja assumed that he was victorious and said, "I must say, Tsunade, knocking you down even when you are weakened was not an easy task. No P4 has done it like you. It's never caused me so much trouble." Hearing that, Tsunade tapped into a new strength. If there was one thing that Tsunade never took, it was kind of them to lick her. Dog 4. The missing ninja turned around and headed towards Naruto, not realizing what was happening behind him. With a new strength, he stood up without feeling any more pain through his already battered and cut body. The missing ninja felt an intention. Very strong killer behind him. He turned around and saw Tsunade standing there with a facial expression that sent a shiver down his spine. With amazing speed, Tsunade ran towards the missing ninja and gave him a rock-hard punch in the face that sent him flying through the air before hitting him with excessiveness. Brutality and speed, the lost ninja had neither the time, nor the strength, nor the speed, nor the skill to evade this new and brutal attack, as he was beaten, punched and kicked from head to toe at pure speed and with a devastating effectiveness. Tsunade then jumped up and pushed both feet directly against his chest, sending him quickly flying off the ground into the air, before crashing hard into a tree, forming a body-shaped dent in the tree. His body was badly battered, and he was also getting blood coming down his mouth. The missing ninja no longer had the strength to move or fight. During the assault, Tsunade, being an expert in human anatomy, inflicted severe damage to certain parts of his body, organs and nervous system, leaving him completely vulnerable and defenseless against any attack. Tsunade walked slowly towards him. Kidnapper Mistreat Zero, and he watched her coming towards him. When she reached him, she looked at him with a cold and unsympathetic expression on her face. Tsunade could see the angry expression on his face, but she could see that his eyes were revealing the truth to her. She saw the fear radiating through his eyes. I was really scared. Even through him, I was trying not to show it. He wanted to move and fight, but found himself unable to do anything. Tsunade soon heard Naruto wake up and start crying for attention. Seeing that the kidnapper was no longer a threat, Tsunade came over to take care of Naruto's needs. Reaching for the baby, Tsunade knelt down and picked up Naruto from the backpack while keeping him wrapped in his blanket. Sitting on the grass while leaning against a nearby tree, Tsunade akuno and pulled Naruto into her arms to calm him down. Even though her body was going numb, she smiled brightly at Naruto as he gurgled, walked up to him, and planted a gentle kiss on his forehead. "My little Naru-chan," Tsunade said affectionately, "I risked my life to save and protect you. And I will happily do it again for you, my little Naru-chan." Moments later, Sarutobi, Kakashi and the Zambu arrived at the scene and saw Tsunade very battered and weakened, singing and cradling lovingly at the hour asleep, Naruto in his arms despite his horrible condition. Not far away was the culprit lying motionless on the ground and in a lot of pain. "Tsunade," Sandaime shouted in concern as he and the others ran towards her. She smiled brightly as her eyes became heavier and heavier before being sent into a world of total darkness. Tsunade's eyes opened to a new environment as the bright lights illuminated her eyes. He strained a little before his eyes readjusted. To the surroundings, she found herself dressed in patient clothes and lying on a medical bed, with bandages around some parts of her body and face, but the pain she had before had disappeared. There was an intravenous needle inserted in his right arm and some wires connected to the upper chest, where his heart and lungs were monitoring his signs. Vitals realized that he was in the hospital in Konoha. Looking around her room, she saw that it was beautifully decorated and had bouquets of flowers with compliments from Yamanaka florist shop. There were wrapped gifts, baby accessories, congratulations and retirement cards.